Welcome back, Dynasty Fantasy Football fans. We've got an awesome show today for you guys as we are back with another episode of Dynasty Trade Titans. We got a special guest on today that I could not be more thrilled about. His name is Ryan. He runs the Fantasy Roundup on YouTube for all your redraft needs and a new Dynasty channel called Dynasty Roundup, as you can see on his tag right there. Go ahead, drop him a subscription. He's got some awesome takes out there and is going to help you guys win plenty of leagues throughout the offseason as we gear up for upcoming rookie drafts, startup drafts that you guys have on the horizon, so much more. I'm not going to waste any time here, Rye. We're going to dive right into trade number one on the screen here that you guys have been submitting through the Discord. So if you haven't already, go ahead and click the link in the description here to join the Discord so you have your chance to submit your trades and trade proposals for the next episode of Trade Titans. But without further ado, you can see it on your screen right there. We got a 10-team, start 10, one quarterback league that is a PPR, no tight end premium. We got Wan'Dale Robinson, Jaden Higgins, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, and a 26th third-round pick on one side, moving for Christian McCaffrey and Dalton Schultz. My man Ryan, where are we starting with this trade, and how do you feel about it?
Well, I think that the really big thing that everybody's going to have to address this offseason for dynasty purposes is obviously Christian McCaffrey. If you were to make this trade 2 years ago, right? Because, a couple years ago, he was dealing with tons of injuries. So it kind of looked like maybe we were going to see some pullback with McCaffrey. If you were to make that trade a couple years ago, people would laugh at you. People would laugh you out of the league. And I think that we're at that point right now where it's like, well, it kind of starts to make a little bit of sense. Wan'Dale is a guy, obviously, who will not be the wide receiver one in New York. Obviously, they've got Malik Neighbors who's loading off the injury. But I will say the Giants, man, like they've got a bright future, I think, with John Harbaugh coming to town. And even though they got Matt Nagy as the offensive coordinator, which a lot of people don't like, I actually don't think it's that bad. I think that it could have been worse. I think it could have been much worse. I just think back to when Matt Nagy was with Mitch Trubisky and he turned him into a Pro Bowler, which wasn't a Shador Sanders type Pro Bowl. Like he actually had a pretty good
No,
year
he had
that
a good
year.
year, yeah.
So yeah, I actually don't mind it as much as other people. Don't love it. But Wando, I do think can be like a good flex option moving forward. And I think that Jaden Higgins, that's the guy that I think probably can make the whole deal work. Because Jaden Higgins, the Texans wanted to make him the wide receiver two very early. Like they tried to do that a
Yeah.
bunch in year one. It just didn't work. I wasn't the biggest Jaden Higgins guy personally out of Iowa State. But there's no arguing that they tried to make him the guy.
Yeah.
So I do think moving forward, they've got a bright, potentially bright future if they can figure out what's going on with CJ Stroud and if they can figure out the offensive coordinator / offensive line to buy CJ time. Bill Krosky, I think I personally, I'd be interested to hear what you think on this. I think they're not going to use him as their
Me
main
neither.
back.
He was such a hype train offseason guy. I would never believed in it. I was telling people left and right, take your profits on JCM. I watched a lot of guys in the offseason, even in some of my own leagues, print a 28 first round pick for JCM. That's a steal in my book. Not to mention, I don't know if you've heard the little chattering, but looks like Rachaad White's going back and forth with Jaden Daniels out on Twitter over here, talking about how he wants to play. Former reunion, Arizona guys getting back together. He's a free agent. I think if you're a JCM owner, everything you wanted to happen last season happened, and he didn't break out. You had no
Yes.
competition. Brian Robinson gets traded away. Now you got Jeremy McNichols and Chris Rodriguez, the two guys you're competing with, and then Jaden Daniels goes down, so you're relying on a backup quarterback. It's like, don't you want to lean into the run game even more then? And they still didn't trust to give him the ball a ton. I don't see it at going to be 25 this season. Are we really still
Yes.
believing in the Bill train? I'm off Bill, personally.
I think that it's an important thing to note too that a lot of people who were Bill Krosky truthers
Mm-hmm.
are still Bill Krosky truthers after the season because if you look at the end of the season for him from a fantasy perspective, it actually was decent.
Yeah.
But I think that in Dynasty, it's just a lot different than redraft, as many know, because Dynasty, you can't just like look at what happened this previous season and say, can we apply that to next season? Dynasty, you have to think about like what these teams are going to do.
Totally.
Washington used a seventh round pick on Bill. Like that doesn't historically, that's not good for
Yeah.
running backs.
Unless
They
you're
are
Chris
very
Carson
easy
out
to
here.
move on. That's right. Yeah, unless you are Chris Carson. But
Unless you're a dog. Yeah.
I don't think JCM is Chris Carson.
No, no. Very
So
different runners. You got to be a physical specimen, you know?
yes, and so I think really it is Jaden Higgins that would make this trade work for the Wandale side if
Hmm.
it was to work. Is the 2026 third as well? It's just a weaker class.
Yeah,
Like I just don't think that I'd be really willing to go out on a limb and say I think that there's a lot of guys in the third round in this rookie class that could really work. Like I think there's a couple names like Malachi Fields, depending on where he ultimately falls in the draft.
sure.
But I do think that overall, if I was a contending team, I would want to take the CMC side while also noting this. Christian McCaffrey, I've done research on this for several years about running backs that have had 350 plus touch seasons and what
Mm-hmm.
happens after that.
Yeah,
So, if you looked at Christian McCaffrey this season, what happened to him, it was a lot of work.
yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
we're not even including playoff volume that he got.
Yep.
He got so many touches. He's already had 350 plus touch seasons. And what consistently happens is that they either lose volume the next year or they get injured because they can't handle another season with that amount of volume on a per game basis. So
Totally.
we are at that age where it's like, I do think we've probably seen the best of Christian McCaffrey. But again, if I was a contending team, I probably would go ahead and side with the CMC side because I just don't see enough here from the other side to where I'm really like, oh, I think there could really be a guy that could reproduce and give me like a top 5 season like McCaffrey has historically done.
Totally. No, to be honest, man, I couldn't be more with you here. In fact, I think this is a smash accept for the Christian McCaffrey side, especially considering it's a 10-team league. I mean, I know it's a star 10, but in a 10-team league and a one quarterback, especially, we're not even playing with Superflex. These skill position players matter so much. You just got the RB1 overall. I know Christian McCaffrey's got the injury risk. Sure, flip a coin, decide whether or not you're going to get a healthy season out of him. I get it. That's the reality of the situation at his age. But regardless, he still was RB1 last year. You know, you can't be sending him away for anything less than there has to be a first round pick included somewhere in the side. I mean, if this was Wandale, Jaden Higgins, and a first, and I'm a rebuilding team, then I'm very much considering it, right? I'm saying, okay, I'm going to get a chance maybe in that 27 class to reload with, a solid first round prospect on top of these two more dart throw guys. I mean, Wandale, like you mentioned, he's a guy I actually really like as a Dynasty buy target. I'm sure some of you guys that have been watching some of my free agent video series are seeing me gas Wandale Robinson up a bit here, but I think he's shown a pretty comprehensive route tree at this point. You know, everyone thought he was a slot guy. Now he's catching passes deep downfield. He's got some decent yak ability. Like, I think Wandale, especially in the right system, whether he plays second fiddle to Malik Neighbors or he goes somewhere else this offseason and gets a nice little payday, could be maybe a funny comp just point scoring wise, not necessarily, player archetype wise, is like, could Wandale Robinson be what Jacoby Myers has been for you the last 3 to 4 years, which is like a solid wide receiver 3 playing between wide receiver like 17 and 25? Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So I think like that's a comfortable guy to add to your roster, especially if you're more of a retooling. But yeah, anything less than having a first included on that side, or a running back of actual quality, maybe like someone would have to be at least Kyron Williams level, Javonte Williams, maybe Javonte. You'd need a hell of a lot more here to get CMC off my
Yes,
roster, but
I would agree.
I don't need to
Yeah.
beat a dead horse on this one. We can jump to our next trade here as we look and take a swing here. We got the 101 on the horizon. Plenty of rookie draft trades coming up this offseason. And I know a lot of people are very excited about the prospect of Jeremiah Love, having the debate, is he better than Ashton Genty, so forth. We will see. Excited to see what happens here in this offseason. But we got another 10-team league here. It's a Superflex, PPR, start 9, so a little shallower than our previous one. 2.0 tight end premium. Unfortunately, there's no tight ends in this trade, so it don't matter. But we got Bucky Irving and Kenneth Walker, Super Bowl MVP, Kenneth Walker, going for the 101 in Jeremiah Love. Ryan, how excited are you about the prospect of Jeremiah Love? Are you willing to pay this price in a 10-team league, or where are you?
I've actually discussed Jeremiah Love several times to the dismay of a lot of people, actually. It's really fascinating to me. I think Jeremiah Love, I've said it a lot. Like, the guy is going to work. He's
Yeah.
going to work. He's got the size, he has the vision, he's got the toughness that any team would want in a three down back. So from a usage perspective, Jeremiah Love is going to work out. The question that I've really had, and a lot of people think it's crazy, and I'm kind of interested to hear what you think. I watched this guy on film,
Mm-hmm.
and I say to myself, I think there's something missing here a little bit with the high end speed. And I will admit this, like when it comes to speed with wide receiver prospects, I actually don't care about 40 times. There's been a lot of guys who have come and ran like 4.5s and
Yep.
4.6s at the combine that have worked. Like DeAndre Hopkins, Jarvis Landry, Devontae Adams. That's just Cooper Cup. Like that's just name a
Totally.
couple
Jackson
high
Smith and
end
Jigba. Yeah.
Baxton Smith and Jigba, another
Yeah.
guy. I think that running back, though, there is more of a translation from a
Mm-hmm.
40 time perspective. So I'm very curious to see what his 40 time is going to be. And overall, that's all to say this. I think Jeremiah Love's a very good prospect. I do not consider him to be a Bijan level prospect, a
Sure.
Saquon level prospect.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he's probably a tier below those guys.
Yeah.
I think that Brees Hall, I was big on coming out of college. I would say he's more in that Brees category for me, to where if the situation really is awesome, he could develop, like he could be a stud. But if the
Well, the
situation's
conversation's
not
popping
great,
up left and right. Do you're on a startup draft tomorrow. Are you taking Ashton Genty or are you taking Jeremiah Love? I've seen them go back to back in multiple of my startups this offseason in the listener leagues. So I'm curious, do you have an
that's
opinion
a
either way?
that's a really good
It's
question.
tough too
I
without landing
honestly,
spots, right? I mean, if he lands in
it
Kansas
is.
City, we're probably going to start throwing him above, right? Just based off
Yeah,
situational
yes.
offensive upside. But knowing what you know today, I'm putting you on the spot.
Knowing what I know today, I honestly probably would take the shot on Jeremiah Love
Mm-hmm.
because Ashton Genty, I've still got a little bit of concern for him. And we won't dive into that rabbit hole because that is kind of a
Sure.
rabbit hole for me.
Yeah.
But I do think knowing what I know today, I'd probably go Jeremiah Love because, like I said, I like the prospect. Like he's a very, very good prospect in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't put him in that Bijan, Saquon, Ezekiel Elliott level territory for me as a dynasty owner, in
Sure.
my opinion. So you kind of look at the other side of this one. It's like Bucky is a guy that I think everyone would agree from a talent perspective, he's got the chops to be a top 5 fantasy producer. The
Yeah.
problem that I've had with Bucky is that you look at his how his career has gone so far. The Bucks have tried to make him their 3 down back.
Mm-hmm.
He can't handle
You
it.
can't handle the
Like
workload. Yeah.
that's the problem is like he's a smaller guy.
Yep.
Like he is one of those types of guys where Jameer Gibbs is obviously slimmer built as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing with Jameer Gibbs is that they've put him in a lot of situations because of Ben Johnson for all these years where they were getting him into space. Bucky, they're trying to like utilize him as like a really good, like up the middle between the tackles type of runner. And it's like you can't do that too much with Bucky.
Yep.
And so I do think Bucky is going to have some issues with injuries potentially in his career. And Kenneth, I think that Kenneth's a stud. We've never really gotten the full picture, I think, from a fantasy perspective that he could have become.
Yeah.
Uh, obviously, the guy's a free agent this offseason, and I
Yeah.
do think that I don't really know. I'm curious to hear because I know you're a
Yeah.
Seahawks fan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Considering everything that they have to do, like probably JSN,
Mm-hmm.
probably Devon Witherspoon, do you think they're going to let KW walk?
So here's the tough thing. I think before the Charbonnet injury, I think they were going to let him walk. Personally, I thought it would be okay. Next man up. We will, not incur the cap hit. Now, I do think, not to dive into defensive players and everything here and making a cap discussion show, but I do think Tariq Woolen's going to walk this offseason. That's going to free up some, spending for you, just as far as what your future spending was going to look like, right? Those cornerback markets are expensive, so you're shedding a guy that's probably going to cost you about 18 million a year on average in the open market, bare minimum. So, I think that opens up the opportunity there. Now, again, they do have some modularity, and again, I won't make this a full Seahawks cap show, but you got the opportunity to, cut off Chenna Nwosu this offseason and really free up even more cap room. A lot of people don't realize that Seattle Seahawks still have a top 5 cap room going into next season, coming off a Super Bowl victory. Extremely rare for Super Bowl champions, obviously, as we know. Not to gas my team up and John Schneider too much here, but at the same time, I do think at this point Kenneth Walker is going to get re-signed. I think that they finally got to see the explosion out of him during the playoffs. And I think, to your point, like we were saying, we haven't been able to see Kenneth Walker be Kenneth Walker, because what's frustrated me is, as a Dynasty analyst myself over here, and you guys probably remember me this last offseason telling you to buy Kenneth Walker, buy Kenneth Walker, buy Kenneth Walker. Now you're a little upset with me because he didn't give you anything during the fantasy season, and then in the postseason, he looked like the monster that we all said he was. But I think we also got to remember this man struggled with injuries for the first couple of years of his career. Now, what I do want to remind people of is everyone can say Kenneth Walker's injury prone. You also got to remember that the Seattle Seahawks had a bottom 5 offensive line all 3 of those first 3 years that he was running behind them. This is the first season that Seattle has had even a beat average offensive line in over a decade. I mean, the Pete Carroll era was as bad as you could imagine for offensive line protection, just as a whole for running backs. So, I think to say Kenneth Walker is super injury prone, is it that, or is it just that he had zero protection those first 3 years? Now, what we will also say, sorry to give you a long-winded answer here, is just that the reason why Kenneth Walker was so fresh in the ability to explode during the playoff was because he did play in a 2-back system through the entire season, where they were able to have Charbonnet stomach at least a decent amount of the load, including some of those, heavier defensive packages near the goal line where Charbonnet was taking some serious hits, right? And so to that degree, can Kenneth Walker make it through a full season with the level of workload that they gave him in the playoffs? This all remains to be seen, right? And so to answer your question here, I love Kenny. I think his upside's incredible. I think if he leaves Seattle, he probably has a better chance of being a full workhorse back again, just because I do see Seattle potentially, whether, Charbonnet is going to miss the first half of the season bare minimum. I think a lot of people forget too, and I just saw the update today. Charbonnet actually just got out of knee surgery yesterday. So it's not like they rushed him into surgery the night of and he's already had a month to recover here. He's starting the ACL recovery at the end of February. We're talking November return, I would guess, would be optimistic for Sharbs. And that's going to be half the season. So I think, all being considered, I love Kenneth. I think he still has top 6 upside from a skill perspective and can absolutely give you a top 10 dynasty or fantasy finish here in the next few years on an extension. If he does stay in Seattle, I think he's probably a bit more doomed to be in that 9 to 15 range. Not because he's not one of the best running backs in the league, which is funny to say. He is. And I think if we compare him, again, making this the Kenneth Walker show, but if we compare him to these guys out there like Travis Etienne or Javonte Williams, who both gave you top 10 finishes this year, or, Javonte Williams almost did at the very end, trickled off a little bit. But Kenneth Walker, in my mind, leaps and bounds talent-wise above those players. But fantasy-wise, is he going to outscore either of them next year? Probably not. I think it's a tough position to be in. So
it's tough to say, but I do think I view similarly on Kenneth to you.
Yeah.
From those two guys, like I would definitely take Kenneth over Javonte. I probably would take Kenneth over ETN.
Yeah.
Both from a fantasy perspective. Now, Javonte probably from a fantasy perspective is going to be better. But all that aside, I think that, like, kind of the point I'm making is that Bucky and Kenneth are both guys that I have issues with from a long-term perspective in Dynasty. Jeremiah Love, while I do have questions about, I think he's going to work. He's going to work as a 3-down back in this league. He's got the size, the durability's there. I probably would take this, the 101. I would take that. What I would personally do, I would personally see if I could be hey, can I get a 3rd rounder in 2027 as well?
Yeah.
That's what I would personally do, but if I couldn't do that, I still would take the one-on-one personally.
Yep. Yep. No, I'm with you here. Not to be too agreeable on this side of the house, but I am with you. I think the 101 is just going to garner you more value on the open market too, because
Yeah,
I also got to ask myself, and I'm sure you're the same way. If I really wanted to, go buy an Amon-Ra St. Brown or go buy low on a Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, one of these guys, right? I don't think the package of those two running backs gets me there, but I do think
right.
dangling the 101 in front of somebody and saying Jeremiah Love, guy who's probably going to be an early second round startup pick, if not a late first round startup pick a year from now. I'll give you maybe the next Jameer Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, however they might view him in their eyes. You might be able to get that deal done, but I don't think you get it done for Bucky and Ken. And so,
Right.
especially in a 10 team here, I'm going to side with you, and I think we're gonna take the 101 there. And I'll jump us to the next trade, but before I do here, give you a second. Ryan, tell us a little bit about your fantasy football journey here on YouTube, where these guys can find you, and where you're from, and what team you support. I'm always curious to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing fantasy football for over a decade at this point, and it's just, I mean, football has always been the game that I love. Like, I started playing it when I was really young, and like my wife always says, like, I like you when football season's over because I feel like I can talk to you again,
Yeah.
and it's kind of true because I just like I'm a football junkie at the end of the day, and so I've been doing fantasy football YouTube for several years at this point. Really kicked off, I would say, in 2023 and started to grow a little bit more. So fantasy football roundup is the main channel during the season. And so that's more, focused towards redraft and best ball as well. I'm
Yep.
a big best ball guy. And Dynasty roundup is where you can find me in the off season, which is where the majority of my time is being spent right now, analyzing prospects because I also love Dynasty. I think my favorite way to play fantasy personally is from Dynasty perspective. I do love it if you get a good group of guys and you just have everyone being involved, no downtime, off seasons full of trades. It is just the most fun way to play fantasy football, in
Totally.
my opinion. So yeah, I mean that's really been the whole thing. Like that's been my whole start with fantasy football, and I love the game. So I can never talk too much about it. Like I could sit here and talk for hours about it. So
Yeah. Hell yeah.
appreciate you having me on, and yeah, come check me out on my YouTube channels.
Hell yeah, guys! Go drop a subscription over to Ryan on both channels. I know you guys all play redraft out there too. He's doing some great work, and we can find you over on your website as well, right? You want to give a little shout out to what you do over there?
Yeah, fsroundup.com, that's my website, and, really the big thing with that, we started that site in 2025. So, a lot of leagues are very competitive, and so you put in waiver claims, right? And waiver claims go through usually at, like, 2, 3 in the morning, depending on your time zone. I know you're over in Europe, but
Yep.
for, people in America in the Eastern Time Zone, Central Time Zone, it goes in, really early in the morning. And so sometimes you find that when you woke up, oh, my waiver claim got taken. And so the backup option that you may have gotten, someone woke up at 3 in the morning to go grab that player. Well, what we've done is we've automated that. So like you can go in and put your backup plans in. So you don't have to wake up at 3 in the morning and still be competitive in these leagues.
Hell
So
yeah.
that's a huge feature on the site. Obviously, you can find my rankings on the site. You can find dynasty articles on the site, but that is a huge piece in in fantasy football that a lot of people kind of forget about unless you are in a really competitive league. So yeah, come check out the site fsroundup.com. We've got great dynasty stuff over there right now. And yeah, I mean, we're continuing to build that site. It's also really good for other sports in fantasy. Like you could play fantasy basketball, fantasy baseball, you could play fantasy hockey through the site as well. So, we support all sports on that platform. Obviously, being a football junkie, that's my thing. But if you are in those other sports as well, we do support those.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. All right, guys. Well, go show Ryan some love, and he can help you with all your fantasy sports out there. On to this next one. We got a 12 team, one quarterback. It's an IDP league, but there's no defensive players here to talk about, so I guess we'll be all right. It's a start 8, so pretty shallow format here, I think. We got Trevor Lawrence, Trey Benson, Devonta Smith on one side, moving for Lamar Jackson and Woody Marks on the other side. where you landed on this one and how we value in the trade.
Well, this is going to be a fun one because I already know that there's a lot of Lamar Jackson stands out there that
Totally.
aren't happy with me right now. And I can definitely tell you, like, as a Steelers fan, I've got a picture of Jack Lambert over my shoulder. And people who know the Steelers history know he's a very important piece of Steelers history.
Totally.
So, obviously, speaking as a Steelers fan, I can definitely tell you Lamar Jackson, of course, is a great player. Like, he's been a great player in the league for many, many years. Lamar Jackson, I'll get more into him in a little bit, but like when I look at Trevor Lawrence and I think about him from a dynasty perspective, once again, you have to think about the long term. You just look at the Jaguars' history as a franchise. I worry about that. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was a time where when Doug Peterson first came over to be the head coach of the Jags several years ago, in that first year, they went to the why am
AFC
I blanking out? The
Championship
divisional
game. Yeah.
round.
Yeah.
Yeah, they went to the divisional round and
Yeah.
barely lost to the Chiefs that day. So,
Yes.
like, they were right there as well that year, and then it really just fell apart. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I think Doug Peterson is actually a decent coach.
Yeah.
Like, going back to that Super Bowl with the Eagles, obviously. All that to say is this: I think Liam Cohen did an incredible job
Mm-hmm.
with Trevor Lawrence this year. Obviously, from a fantasy perspective, he looked better than he has looked in years. I do worry about the history, like the history of the Jags and the future moving forward in a more unstable franchise. That stuff matters a lot in Dynasty because you see a lot of these times, these teams kind of collapse a little bit.
Yeah.
That being said, I do think Trevor obviously does have a pretty decently bright future from a dynasty perspective, considering the age and the talent. Trey Benson, I am a Trey Benson guy. Like
Oh
I am
yeah.
a Trey Benson truther. I have been since 2024. I really liked the size and the speed, the athleticism. Everything was there for it. And I continue to say this. I really do think we were robbed of a Trey Benson breakout this past year. Like it was going to happen. James Conner went down. And even before that, Trey Benson, it was actually kind of being a 50-50 split a little bit
Mm-hmm.
with James Conner. And he was better. Like, so I do think we got robbed. And that's kind of to say this. As a Trey Benson truther, I do worry about if it will ever happen at this point.
Yeah.
So you obviously can't value him where you used to value him and where you had to pick him in rookie drafts just a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Now, Devonta Smith is interesting too because Devonta Smith, he could be the wide receiver one in Philly
Totally.
like as soon as this next year. I mean, AJ Brown is I mean, who knows if he's going to be back, right?
Yeah.
Like he's been talking for a while now about how he kind of is unhappy with the offense, unhappy with Jalen Hurts. Like there's a lot of friction there. And
Yeah.
so if it opens up for Devonta Smith, I think the cap, and I'm kind of curious to get your opinion on this. Jalen Hurts, I've got a lot of issues with as a passer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Devonta Smith, if it was to open up for him, I could probably see him being a top 15 wide receiver or a top 12, maybe. I'm
Yeah.
kind of curious to hear what you think about that.
No, I mean, I love Devonta Smith personally. I was a huge Devonta Smith fan coming out of college, and his time at Alabama. And actually, I clearly remember in my longest running dynasty league being beyond thrilled, sitting at the 111, barely coming off a sore championship loss. But having Devonta Smith fall to me at the end of the first and saying, this just feels like a steal. I think I got the best receiver potentially in the class here at the end of the first round. So feeling happy about that. Now, unfortunately, like you said, he's kind of been stuck behind A.J. Brown a lot of his career here, and the system hasn't really played out to allow him to, I think, flourish to the full of his potential. Now, he's not old. He's 28, so you're just still entering that wide receiver kind of prime, right? You might have 4 really solid years ahead of you of Devonta Smith, especially a really fluid route runner and not a guy that, is 100% reliant on top-end speed, right? So he absolutely could still give you some great production if A.J. Brown vacates the room this offseason, which I think there's a decent probability he does so. Now, all
Yes.
that being considered, I think just in the context of the trade, it's not enough for me. I like, regardless of if Lamar took a value dip this offseason, which he did, I just think I always like to think about the fantasy market in general. I think there's still enough people that are Lamar Jackson believers out there and remember what he did for you a season before to say that, especially in like a 1 quarterback league, start 8 like this, it's a start 8. Like, I know you were talking about Trey Benson. Personally, me, Trey Benson, Woody Marks, you're not contending if you're starting these guys in a start 8. I don't even care if Trey Benson becomes the lead back for Arizona this year. I still don't think you're contending. I think in a start 8 format, you need a Barkley, a Kyron, a Josh Jacobs on a prime season. You need a guy that's going to finish top 8 to 12 at the position, guaranteed as your, RB2 minimum. If you're going to win at start 8, you're only playing 8 players every week. You have to have these top end guys. And are they okay depth pieces? Sure. But I'm not moving off Lamar Jackson for Trevor Lawrence and some depth pieces. Now, I love Devonta Smith as well, like we said, but even then, I got to be pretty sure that Devonta Smith can give me a top 9 to 13 season this year if I'm going to do this deal. And I just don't think it's enough. I ironically, like, not to bounce between trades, but the next trade we had here was the same guy submitting it saying, well, I have this offer on the table as well, saying I could take Baker, Javonte Williams, Jalen Waddle. Now, to be completely frank, the Baker piece is what makes me nervous here after the second half of last season. But to throw it back at this guy, and unfortunately they're two different trade partners, so I know you're probably not getting it done. But if this was Trevor Lawrence, Javonte Williams, and Jalen Waddle, then I would do it. Because I think the difference between Lamar's scoring and Lawrence's scoring in that Liam Cohen offense is probably enough standard deviation to make up for, like we talked about, well, Javonte Williams probably can be a top 10 back next year with the workload he's going to see in Dallas if he stays healthy. And Jalen Waddle, with a Tyreek Hill vacating that room, and regardless of what they do in the draft here, probably does have the potential, at least in the short term, to be the wide receiver 1 in Miami. Now, those things all being considered, I think I would maybe even swing here on Baker on this one if you have a loaded rest of your roster, just because it's a 1 QB and saying, okay, if I lose 85 to 100 points of scoring from Lamar to Baker, am I making up for it a lot by moving from my RB2 right now being Woody Marks to Javonte Williams? Yes, you will, because I don't think Woody Marks is going to do almost anything for you in this kind of format next season. So not to jump around too much, but that's kind of where my thought process lies on it all.
Well, it's interesting because I think this is the first trade that we actually have completely different views on
Yeah,
as
yeah.
far as like where we decide. Because I would personally, like, if it was me, I would take the Trevor side of the trade. Like, I would
Interesting.
personally rather have the Trevor side, and the reason is because Devonta Smith. And I
Okay.
know it's an 8-person league. I get that. And I would agree with you typically, whereas like you're not going to get like if you're rolling out Woody Marks or Trey Benson in an 8-man league, like you're probably not doing very good.
Sure.
But the thing about Lamar that I was going to get into, I've got real issues with Lamar from a dynasty perspective
Mm-hmm.
because if I've seen this like time and time again in the AFC North, like whenever Lamar played the Pittsburgh Steelers, he was very much neutralized. And the
Sure.
reason why is because Mike Tomlin, through all his faults, and I wasn't the biggest Tomlin guy, Tomlin was a good coach because he knew that how to stop Lamar. And if you took away his mobility, his passing was significantly hampered
Sure.
because he's such an electric player that if you take that element out of his game, he really becomes significantly limited. And I think what we've seen is that this guy has dealt with a bunch of lower body injuries. And at that age that he's at, this guy's gonna be he's 29.
He
Like
is.
he's
He
not
is.
exactly a spring chicken anymore. If you look at the history of running quarterbacks, they typically don't last with their legs too long. And so I
Yep.
think that when you take away that part of his game, that becomes a real issue from a fantasy perspective because he's a good thrower, but
Yeah.
he's not like that's not really what his total game is. It's a
Sure.
lot of it is dependent on what he's able to do, moving around in the pocket, being able to buy time, and also just being able to rip off a 50-yard run.
Yeah.
That's Lamar. And so
Totally.
that I think is kind of going to start being taken away a little bit. That's why I would take Trevor. But the
Mm-hmm.
other trade, like, because the other thing with like the Trevor trade is the Devonta Smith angle, like I discussed.
Yeah.
The other trade is that I don't think Waddle I value as the same way I value Devonta Smith because we saw a season with Waddle, and I was actually really big on him
Mm-hmm.
last year before I knew Tyreek was going to get injured, and it really didn't come to fruition. And you could blame that on Tua, obviously. He
Yeah.
wasn't good, and kind of looks like Waddle might be on the move this offseason. But
Yeah.
I think Devonta
Potentially.
Smith's just a better player and when it
That
comes
one
to
I'll
that
agree with
Baker
you on.
T-Law
Yeah.
split, yeah, and I think when it comes to that Baker and T-Law split, I've got the same concerns with Baker. I think
Mm-hmm.
the offensive coordinator carousel that's been going on in Tampa for years
Yeah.
really took effect this year. So I do
Yeah.
think personally, if it was me, I would rather take the T-Law side because I have
Mhm.
more faith in a dynasty format in T-Law than I do with Baker. I get it, Javonte Williams could be a really good piece for you.
Yeah.
I would personally rather invest in Devonta Smith more than I would in Javonte from a dynasty angle. So that's kind of the reason I would personally take the T-Law side
Yeah.
rather than Baker side.
No, no, I see it. And I think absolutely, like you said, there's arguments to be made both side. If you guys made it this far into the video, comment. Let me know. Where are you guys landing here? What do you think? Are you a Devonta Smith believer? What do we think about Jalen Waddle this next season in Miami? I think, another question that comes up to play when we talk about Lamar, like you were saying, is I'm already starting to hear a little bit of rumblings of now that we've got a regime change, could you actually see the coaches address the wide receiver room in Baltimore, and instead of giving him a Devontae or a DeAndre Hopkins on his final legs and stuff like that, does Jordan Tyson maybe land there? Do they give him a great upside piece to work with? Do they take a swing maybe on Alec Pierce in free agency? All to be considered. We've got some interesting things going on in Baltimore, so we'll have to revisit the Lamar discussion as we approach the NFL draft and free agency, because I'm curious to see if any of that discourse might change as we push along. Speaking of pushing along, let's dive into this next one, which is quite a blockbuster here. Some very big names being moved around on this one. So we've got a 12-team super flex PPR start 10. We've got Malik Neighbors, J.K. Dobbins, the 101, so Jeremiah Love most likely here, plus the 107 on one side. Moving for Bucky Irvin, who we did talk about, CeeDee Lamb, and a 27 first-round pick. And to be frank, guys, we obviously can't tell too much about this 27 pick as it's over a year out, so I'm not going to project it to be crazy early by any means. Let's say, for the sake of argument here, since this guy's sending away the 101 anyway, he's probably in ultimate contending mode acquiring CeeDee Lamb. Let's say it's a mid to late 27 first for the sake of argument. But where do we land here, Ryan? There's a lot coming at you.
Well, anytime I think that there's like a blockbuster trade in a dynasty league, the way I personally approach it is okay, so we're talking about big name players here. Everybody
Yep.
knows all those players, and everybody knows that they're very good in dynasty. You have to split hairs. And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what I've been getting across this whole time we've been discussing is that I like to kind of look at the negatives a little bit because you have to split hairs when you're talking about a trade of this magnitude. Like Malik Neighbors, to me, I still value him quite a bit in Dynasty. And I kind of got into it a little bit with Wandale. We were discussing him. It's mostly because I like the future of the Giants. And I do think that from a dynasty perspective, Jackson Dart will get stabilized. And I think that's very important because we saw the talent last year. Like we saw the flashes of Jackson Dart. Didn't get a full season of it, but there's a lot of chaos in that building. And I think when things get stabilized with John Harbaugh there, it's going to start doing better for Jackson Dart, and it's going to start stabilizing more fantasy production very consistently for these players. Good thing with Malik, he's so young, and I think he will be able to rebound from that injury. So I don't really worry about Malik from the injury perspective.
Mm-hmm.
J.K. Dobbins to me, kind of a throw-in piece. I like obviously I really like J.K. Dobbins coming out of college. Like I think we kind of got robbed a little bit from an elite asset.
Yeah.
Obviously, it hasn't happened, but I did think of him as a really good player. J.K. Dobbins at this point, like we can kind of expect. I think we can expect another season of him in Denver, like we just saw,
I
which is
think so
that
too.
he'll.
I think he lands back in Denver here.
I agree, and I think that it's a good thing because Denver is a very good spot for him. Offensive line is really good. They need that type of power runner, and I think as long as he can hold up, which typically is not a 17 game stretch, he'll be good in fantasy. So
Yep.
I do like having J.K. Dobbins as a contributing asset to the team in a 10, in a 10-man league. Or
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is 12-man
12
league.
man league. Yeah.
So then you get the 101 in it, and obviously what you said about the 27 first, like for sake of argument, if it's a mid to late first round pick in 2027, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to convince me why the 108 in the 2027 draft is better than the 101 in this draft. Like, that's just,
Yeah.
I can't get on board with that.
Yeah.
And so I think when you're looking on the other side, a lot of it's hype driven with that 27
Yes.
first. Like,
Yes.
what if this guy has a terrible season and it ends up being the 101? And you're looking at probably Jeremiah Smith.
Hmm.
And in that case, it's like, well, what do you need more? Because they're both really good prospects. But Bucky, I've said the issues that I have with him. I have concern with the durability, while also acknowledging he's a very good player. CeeDee Lamb is interesting too. I think CeeDee Lamb is obviously great, but I think with George Pickens there, like it kind of looks like he's going to be there at least for another year. That does make me wonder, like, what is the target share going to be divided up into? Because Pickens was a very dominant player for a stretch, even with CeeDee Lamb.
And he took those
So
touchdown numbers a lot from CD, which I know is what
yes,
most people are worried about.
yes, exactly. So like I am kind of at that same place as well. Like I think
Yeah,
CeeDee Lamb is a better overall receiver than George
of
Pickens.
course.
But
Yeah.
from a fantasy perspective, like if you start taking away those touchdowns from him and giving him to George Pickens, well, that guess what? That's going to really hurt CeeDee Lamb's dynasty value. So
Absolutely.
you give me that 101 in this trade. Like I think it's as weird as it sounds, kind of a no-brainer for me. Like
Yeah.
I am taking the 101 and I am also taking Malik Neighbors, who I think is tremendous. So because essentially what you can do is you can get Malik Neighbors, you can get Jeremiah Love, and then you can also get, J.K. Dobbins for a couple years versus what you don't know you're going to get in 2027. And two players that are very good in Dynasty.
Yeah.
I think I'd rather just take that 107, that 101 side personally.
No, completely. I'm with you here, and just to break down the quick maths for the viewers over there. This is how I always look at trades like this, right? We got Neighbors and Lamb. Those guys damn near go back to back in startup drafts, even this offseason. As I've seen, you've got Neighbors going at the end of the first, CD at the beginning of the second, or vice versa, depending on how you want to build your team. In fact, I'm looking at a startup board right now where we had Neighbors and CD go 2 picks between each other, 111, 201. So they go. You take your pick there, but let's wash those two out of the trade. They got the same level of startup value on the open market. Now I'm going to look at it and I'm going to go, okay, I've got Bucky or Dobbins in the 107. Quite frankly, I mean, we like Bucky Irving, but does that package not get you damn near the same value on the open market? I mean, I think if I'm making a trade right now and I'm offering somebody Bucky Irving straight up, let's say maybe I'm trying to go get Alad McConkey in a second, you offer him, Bucky, or you offer him Dobbins in the 1-7. I think they're looking at that trade pretty similar value. I can't imagine it's too different at this point. Maybe you value Bucky way higher and because of the tier break, but those ones for me, I'm probably fine with either side there. And then now we're talking a lot more about, okay, 27 first or the 101. Unequivocally, it's Jeremiah Love because I'm just not taking the swing on even if that pick is projected early. You never know. All it takes is one guy to fire sale his team, and that pick's now knocked down another spot and another spot, and now it's the
Right.
106 and the 107, and all to be said. Regardless, I'm taking what I have there on the left side, and I'm running away with it. Not to mention, we've already talked about Jeremiah Love as being potentially a huge upside piece here. So that's the way I'd look at it. It's not a bad trade. The value's relatively even. I think you could swing it both ways depending on how you want to argue. But I think you and I are in the same boat on this one as we value this 101 here. All right, I'm gonna hit you with a couple here because I want to go through a little rapid fire section here. We got a lot of trade questions to go through, so let's see how many we can bolster through here and get a little rapid fire. But this one's interesting because it's got a little note with it. So there's two trades from the same team here. He's wondering. He said it's a 10-team Superflex PPR. It's a start 10. Tight end premium is 1.5. So obviously we're getting a tight end premium here, and it is
Mhm.
Bowers on one side with Terry McLaurin. And the other side is getting Gadsden and London. And he said, I am a strong contending team with solid depth. I really, really want to acquire Bowers. I'm trying to be team one here. So he's getting some upside there at the Bowers position. Are you making this deal? Are you sending away Drake London to bring in Brock Bowers in a 1.5 tight end premium?
I don't want to be sure with this one, but it is kind of a no-brainer for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Brock Bowers, to be completely honest, is like this is the Travis Kelsey of
Yes.
Dynasty, like in this
Yes.
generation. Like this
Mm-hmm.
guy, if you just think of what he did these last 2 years, like
Yep.
and obviously last year was full of injuries, but you look at the game logs last year. the guy had 40 to 30-point games sprinkled throughout the year,
Hmm.
even with, like, the knee injury that he dealt with basically all of last year.
Yeah,
And he also dealt with Geno Smith at quarterback. In the
totally.
previous year, he was dealing with Aiden O'Connell.
Yeah,
He was dealing with,
Gardner Minshew.
yeah, Gardner Minshew. Like,
Yeah,
they had so many issues, and this guy is such a freaking animal.
yeah,
And he was just running through defenses. Nobody could stop the guy, and everyone knew he was the only thing that mattered before Ashton Genty.
yep,
So I just think it's just so obvious when I look at a guy like Brock Bowers, and I'm like, I have no questions on Brock Bowers. I still have questions on Drake London to a certain extent. I
sure.
like great talent. I love Drake London, the talent. And I think if everything was like even like if he was in Dallas, for example,
Yeah,
and there was no CD Lamb, it's like that's a no-brainer. Dak is a guy who's going to feed
gonna
this
feed the
guy, and
ball.
we know it's going to work.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the problem is obviously with Penix, we don't even know if he's their guy moving forward.
Yep.
And we also don't know who the guy would be because Kirk Cousins, if that's your guy moving forward, I don't like that. And
Yeah.
then I do like Gadsden. I will say that like
Hmm.
I like Aronde Gadsden. But if I have the opportunity to get Brock Bowers, it's a no-brainer. Like, it is
Yeah.
a real no-brainer, especially if you're a contender, then you can put Terry McLaurin on your team as
Totally.
a flexible guy, and that's going to potentially take you over the top if he has another good season. So, yeah, I
Totally.
think for me, I think it's a no-brainer. Like, I'm going Brock Bowers here for sure.
No, I'm totally with you. I mean, just even for the viewers considering out here, if you're in a contending window, this is your chance. You get a cornerstone asset in Brock Bowers and a tight end premium. You got to take it. I think obviously London poses some great upside, but fine. You flash back a year ago, he finishes wide receiver 5, gives you 280 fantasy points in a PPR format, depending on how you're playing here, right? But then if you are to go ahead and look at the same potential upside that you got out of Terry McLaurin before his injury riddled season this year, right? So let's look at the same year that we got out of Drake London and we go on the Terry McLaurin side of things. We can go ahead and see that Terry McLaurin actually was wide receiver 7 overall, gave you 271 fantasy points. So it was an 8-point swing. It was a one touchdown swing between the two players. And of course, we're talking about a 6-year age gap. That matters, 5.5-year age gap. I'm not going to
Mhm.
pretend like it doesn't. But
Of
Terry
course.
just got extended. You're in a contending window. I think you get 2 years right here out of Terry McLaurin with no Debo now and no Zach Ertz. I don't know how they address the rest of the wide receiving options in free agency here, but could Terry McLaurin absolutely give you 80% of what Drake London gives you in the next 2 years? And you got a massive upgrade at tight end here so that you can really solidify that championship. It's a no-brainer. Like you said, a no-brainer. We moved to the next one because, it's the same team actually. And he said, on top of that, still a deep roster, but he's like, I am interested to see if I should be doing this where we go. It's actually Garrett Wilson and a 27 first, or sorry, Garrett Wilson and a 28 first moving for a 27 first, but he said the 27 first is projected to be the 101. The guy's team is terrible. I'm expecting it at the bare minimum to be a top 2 pick. I don't know about you, but I'm gonna usurp you here and just say if you do have the depth here and you've already said you have a deep roster, if you are pretty confident it's going to be the 101, and he says he is pretty confident about it, you got to take Jeremiah Smith here, right? I mean, we don't even know who that's going to be. Maybe it's a quarterback, but even then, I think I'm going there. And I'm a big G. Willie guy, but give me some of your thoughts on that one.
Well, I think the problem that everybody recognizes with Garrett Wilson is he's with the Jets. Like,
Yeah,
that's just
yeah,
sorry, but like that's what I discuss when I talk about in Dynasty, you've got to think about like how these teams are structured. Like, look at the Cleveland Browns, the New York Jets, the
yep,
Jags historically. Obviously, there's been good fantasy performers, but it's not really sustainable because they're so dysfunctional.
totally.
And the Jets have a problem. If you just look at what Dante Moore did, the guy was like projected to be definitely a New York Jet. He was like, I'm gonna
I
roll
don't
the
want to go.
dice.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
want to
yeah,
go.
I don't want to go here. So it's like they've got an issue as far as players coming out of the draft not wanting to be New York Jets.
Yeah,
So I just think that like there's so many issues, and Garrett Wilson, I think, is going to be one of those like sad but true stories at the end of his career where it's like kind of feels like we didn't get all of what we could have. The guy's a
yeah,
stud. Everybody knows that, but You don't have a quarterback throwing you the ball. Look at what happened to Justin Jefferson this year.
Totally.
So
Totally.
I just think, yeah, I would do the same thing. I would if you have like 80 to 90% certainty that you're going to be getting the 101, then yes, absolutely. With 2027 first. The only thing I would add is like I'm a greedy guy. Like
Yeah.
if I can smell blood in the water and say like, hey, I don't know if you're going to be the 101, so maybe give me a 28 second round pick in
Yep.
addition to this.
Yep.
You may or may not be able to make that happen, but I am always for like, why not try to get a little
Now,
bit more?
Ryan brings up a great point here, guys. Always ask for a little kickback. If the answer is no, then you can take the deal. But always,
Yes.
always ask. Always ask. I like the process there. You know, the next one I am very curious on your opinion on, because specifically we have so much conversation around him this offseason in the Dynasty community. And I think there's some massive swing on Brian Thomas Jr., right? There's guys that are completely out on him and can't be, I don't want to touch Brian Thomas Jr. with a 6-foot pole. And then there's other guys that are like, buy low, buy low, buy low. You know, Brian Thomas Jr. is the ultimate stud, whatever. I will just start the conversation by saying, I'm, and maybe we can talk about this for 1 second too, but we talk about in real life stuff all the time. And you and I were even talking about that before we hopped on here, right? It is the sample size. I did the research. I went out there, and you guys can go and fact check me. A first-round wide receiver that has been traded, not going into the final year of his deal, like A.J. Brown was for the Tennessee Titans, and not with an extension on the horizon, it almost never happens. In the last 20 years, you won't find examples of it, especially guys that actually performed well. And I just mean from the sake of, does anybody take a first-round wide receiver and then use him for 1 year and then, have one down year and then send him away for a third-round pick? It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. I mean, you'd have to get a first back. And I don't know a lot of teams in this year's pretty loaded wide receiver draft class that's sending a first-round pick for a wide receiver, because you could just take another one if you wanted to. And so I'm curious what your opinion is on this, because a lot of people are like, well, Brian Thomas Jr. is getting traded. He's getting traded. I really don't think he's getting traded. I'm telling you guys, from an NFL GM perspective, I think that's extremely unlikely. We can all have our wishful talking here, but let's first start with, do you think Brian Thomas Jr. actually has a chance to get traded? And beyond that, like, let's assume he doesn't get traded, because I really don't think he does. Are you taking the 107 for Brian Thomas Jr., or where are we landing on his value today?
Well, to start out with, I think it's funny about the trade potential with Brian Thomas Jr. because, if you would have asked me in October during the season, I would have been like, yeah, it kind of does look like there's a decent possibility. Because they traded for Jacoby Myers midseason, like
Yep.
Parker Washington was breaking out. And all of a sudden, Brian Thomas Jr. was basically this deep threat. And that was it. So it really was grim for Brian Thomas Jr. from a dynasty perspective just a couple months ago. And the funny thing is, like, I still would have believed that they would have traded him until we got the news just like a couple weeks ago. Jacksonville confirmed that they're making Travis Hunter a full-time corner first, basically,
Yes.
which is wild to me because,
Yeah.
like, I thought, like, I remember at the time thinking to myself, I don't know how you would move up from the 105, I think that we're at, to the 102 in the NFL draft to draft a corner. Like, it didn't make much sense to me.
Yep.
And so the fact that they're doing it kind of says to me, yeah, they're going to keep Brian Thomas Jr. So, no, I don't think that Brian Thomas Jr. at this point is going to be traded.
Yeah, because you
Unless,
also
like,
got to remember too, and this is the interesting thing. Like, you and I can probably agree with this. Everyone wants to talk about Brian Thomas Jr. getting traded. Who are the wide receiver needy teams that always need wide receivers that everyone's talking about? The Buffalo Bills. They're in the AFC. The New England Patriots, they're in the AFC. Like, you're not going to ship off a Brian Thomas Jr., let's say, fine, we'll get rid of him for, a third-round pick, which is probably what you'd have to do, because quite frankly, like, let's look at also the NFL trade market. First, don't just go. DK Metcalf goes for a third. and DK Metcalf is, lined up multiple productive seasons as probably what most NFL GMs considered at the time to be a relatively alpha wide receiver in the NFL, right? Or at least had the upside to be an alpha wide receiver. And then you look again at like last offseason, no one's willing to give up a first-round pick for Trey Hendrickson. And that's an all-star defensive player, right? And so firsts don't just go. You don't just move first for the hell of it, unless you're the Niners GM trading for Trey Lance. But again, just to that point, you're not going to take a third-round pick from the Bills or the Patriots, both probably contending rosters, right? So it's going to be a late third, not to mention, and they're in your own conference, so you have to go through them to get to that championship game regardless. All to be said, you don't have the incentive as an NFL GM to be like, I'll take a discount on the guy I'm selling because I paid a first for him and I'll take a third. And at the same time, I'm going to send him to one of my contenders that I have to go through to get to the Super Bowl. So if he does have a resurgence, now he's beaten me down in the playoffs when I need it. At that point, you just have more value. He's cheap. He's a rookie. Just keep him on your roster and we'll use him for a couple more years and then he'll test free agency, right? Like again, I just don't see the thought process when people create these trades in their mind. It's not realistic.
Ironically, the one team that I was thinking of on the NFC when you were talking about all the needy teams in the AFC with wide receivers, the one team ironically that came to mind was San Francisco.
Sure.
And so if in theory, if they were to give up a first, then if you were the Jags, you'd be like, yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah.
But it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
No NFL team is going to come in and do that. So yeah, I do think he's a Jaguar. And that if that's the case, then you look at the 107 and the value that you're going to be getting in this particular draft class. Once again, we talked about this before. I think we were doing this show, but I think that if you just look at it, either whether it's a super flex or not a super flex, and I know it's a super flex in this one, but by the time you pick at the 107, that's when all the really good players, the top end guys are gone.
Yeah,
because Fernando Mendoza will be gone. Well, Kenyon Sadiq will also be gone. So at that point, you're really just taking shots on players that in next year's draft would probably be second round picks.
Yeah.
Into deeper into the second round. So
you're probably playing at the 107 with a Casey Conception and Omar Cooper Jr. Right. You're probably taking swings on those guys, right? So
that's right. And I've got concerns and question marks with all those guys. I think that if it was me, if we were talking about the 107 and the 2025 draft, then maybe that's a different story because that draft had a lot of dudes in the middle of the first round. But this draft, I'd rather just hold on to BTJ. I am not all for, to kind of answer the question you had at the beginning, where do I stand in this whole argument? Because it's obviously a huge discussion point in Dynasty right now. I don't lean one side or the other heavily. I am not fully on board with holding or buying BTJ right now. And I'm not on the side of you got to get rid of the guy. Sure. I think I'm going to be patient with him if I have him. And if an offer comes up that makes sense one way or the other, I would take it or consider it. But this one, it doesn't make much sense for me personally.
I feel you there. I think I'm tough on this one. I think I might sit on the fence a little bit and just throw it back at the viewers and say, your league economy better than we do. If people are willing to still value this year's class as firsts and not lean into that narrative, maybe they don't consume a ton of content, right? And they haven't been swung by the content creators out here that are telling you ship away everything past the 105, right? Like Ryan was kind of just saying. And keep in mind, we don't know, right? You might be in one of those leagues. If that's the case, then I think I will take the liquidity of the pick just because if someone's willing to treat it like a mid first, I think I'd just be able to buy more. I think there's probably in a 12-man league, right? And I always say this about players, and this is why understanding your league economy is so helpful, right? If you're in a 12-man league, there might be 6 guys that are out on Brian Thomas Jr. that don't want to touch him, and there might be 6 guys that are still believers. But if you're in a league where most of the people value picks and value firsts as firsts, well, then you might be able to execute a tier-up trade, right, where you take R.J. Harvey and you add that 107 and you're on a contending roster. You had an unlucky first-round exit in the playoffs this year, and you send him away for Jonathan Taylor. And if someone's willing to do a trade like that because they're saying, oh, I'm getting a young running back in a first, then now I feel like I have more buying power, right? Versus most likely, what I'm saying is if you play in a league where guys actually value first, you might have 11 suitors that are interested in that first. And you might only have 6 suitors that are interested in Brian Thomas Jr. It's just about understanding your league economy. Because if you play in a league like that, give me the first. If not, like you said, I'll take BTJ. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll add this really quick. I think you bring up a good point
Yeah.
as far as like how to value liquidity with like
Mhm.
draft assets. I'm not like fully on board with saying if past the like if you have the 106, the 107, anything beyond that, I'm not telling people go out and send
Fire
it
sale it. Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah.
I think what I'm saying, like, because I think that the way you have to play Dynasty, you've got to look at it as a chessboard and think
Totally.
about moves ahead of time. We're at the point right now where it's like all eyes are on this class, so everybody kind of knows like there is a drop off in talent. So
Yes.
at this point, if you're selling off a first round pick in this draft that's not a top 5 pick, well then you should be reinvesting that into next year's class. Like you need to be
Sure.
looking ahead and what you're investing in. To me, to be honest with you, I would personally like take the shot on BTJ because I do think that it was a weird year, but win year 2 with Liam Cohen, I do think there is potential that it could rebound. So,
Yep.
yeah, just to clarify, I'm not
No,
fully
yeah.
on board with
Yeah.
selling like anything beyond the 105 or the 106.
Mm-hmm.
Like just for anything, I think
Yeah.
you got to think a little bit strategically, kind of like you were saying
Yep.
about how you would evaluate liquidity versus a player that's going to produce for you this year.
Totally. Totally. No, I appreciate that. I'm gonna hit you with a rapid fire here real quick, and I'm curious. We're talking about Brian Thomas Jr. I'm gonna throw a couple players at you. You just tell me: are you taking Brian Thomas Jr.? Or are you taking this player, Dynasty, right now?
Okay.
Brian Thomas Jr., Roma Dunze.
Roman Dunze.
Roma Dunze. Okay. Brian Thomas Jr., Jamison Williams.
Ooh. ETJ.
BTJ. Okay. Brian Thomas Jr., Zay Flowers.
Zay Flowers, actually. I'm actually kind of a Zay Flowers guy.
You're a Zay Flowers guy? Brian Thomas
I,
Jr., T. Higgins.
T. Higgins.
T. Higgins. Okay. Last one for you. Brian Thomas Jr., Luther Burden. Everyone loves Luther Burden right now. He's damn near the hottest product since sliced bread out here. Okay.
Oh man, if it was a trade straight up, I would ask for more,
Mm-hmm.
but I do prefer Luther Burden on my dynasty team. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Ryan, we've been running just over an hour here. I appreciate all the viewers that have made it this far. If you've made it this far, go ahead and show some love in the comments here. I'm gonna hit you with one more. I know we've got a bunch more trades that we wanted to get through, but of course, you and I, we got so much to talk about. We'll have to do it again. We'll have to get to all the rest of the viewers trades, but I'm gonna give you one more trade here. And we were talking about Brian Thomas Jr. This is also including BTJ, so we're building off the topic here. Made it nice and continuous. But we also got Bo Nix in the mix here. We got Tedero McMillan here. We got a lot of names that are big, and I wanted to get your opinion on some of them. So I'll leave the viewers with this one. We've got a 10-team Superflex Start 10. We've got Bo Nix, Brian Thomas Jr., and Tedero McMillan on one side. On the other side, we got Nico Collins. We got the 203 in this year's class. We got Zay Flowers, who we were just talking about. And we got Jordan Love. Not Jeremiah Love, but Jordan Love. Okay, so the QB swap is Nix to Love. You've got, Flowers and Brian Thomas Jr. back to back there. And then you've got Tet versus maybe Nico in the 203. I'm trying to break down all the math for you here. I'll hand it over to you. Where do you land on this trade and walk me through it a little bit?
Well, it's funny because I actually, in one of my dynasty leagues, I actually have both Bo Nix and Jordan Love. It's a one quarterback league. And so having those two guys is not ideal. Uh, I think that where I sit with Bo Nix versus Jordan Love is Jordan Love, the talent, I like him more. I think
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Love as a talent in the NFL is actually very good. It kind of irks me a little bit how much LaFleur chooses to run sometimes versus just kind of letting Jordan Love uncork it because he's capable. Now, the
Absolutely.
thing I tell people with Bo Nix a lot is this is like a thing in my dynasty, one of my dynasty leagues, is people are like, well, I don't know, like if you just watch Bo Nix, I don't think he's that good. And it's like, I agree there's moments where Bo's not great, but my thing with Bo is that I trust Sean Payton to
Mm-hmm.
the certain point of like the guy has done very well with quarterbacks in his career. And so I think to myself, as long as he likes Bo Nix, I'm going to continue to like Bo Nix in Dynasty as well.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, he threw the whole playbook at Bo Nix right away.
Yeah.
And Bo
Yeah.
Nix has had a lot of good moments from a fantasy perspective. So I think from a fantasy perspective, I would probably prefer Bo Nix a little bit over Jordan Love,
Yeah.
just lining those two quarterbacks up. Now, I think that when you're looking at, we obviously went through BTJ
Mm-hmm.
and Zay Flowers. I personally like the Zay Flowers side of this trade. And I think that when I think about Tetero and McMillan, obviously what we saw from him this year was good.
Yeah.
And I do think that he's a better like, I wasn't the biggest Tetero and McMillan guy, I'll be honest,
Mm-hmm.
coming out of college. Thought he was a little overrated. Prove me wrong. Like, he's a very good player,
Yeah.
and I do think he's capable of being an alpha wide receiver one moving forward. I think that the concern that I still have with him is not him. It's mostly Bryce Young. Because this is a something that I'm worried is going to repeat again.
Mm-hmm.
Like when the Dolphins signed Tua, to that long, massive, like that long, big deal after he had like a couple good seasons for them statistically, it turned into a disaster,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, like, we saw the evolution of how that contract really affected everything. And the wide receiver one for them, Jalen Waddle, this year wasn't very good. And so I worry about Tet McMillan a little bit from that perspective, where it's like, if Bryce Young is going to continue to be their quarterback long term, I don't feel like he's going to like take this transformative jump from like wide receiver 15, wide receiver 20 to like wide receiver 5. I don't
Sure.
think that will happen with Bryce Young.
I agree
And
with that.
that's kind of where I get worried about this, because I think they're going to
Mm-hmm.
at least have them for, maybe a Daniel Jones type of deal or something like that.
Interesting.
Um, so I do worry a little bit about Tetero and McMillan. I think Nico Collins is a very good dynasty asset still. Obviously there's questions with his quarterback as well. Nico is the type of guy where I think you'll get really good production from him the next several years. I think that Nico is the type of guy that can definitely be a top 10 wide receiver for the next 3 years
Yep.
and has the ability to like take over a lot of games for you. And I don't feel, like I said, that Tetero McMillan is a guy that I consider to be this like top 5 dynasty wide receiver right now. I just
Sure.
don't feel that way. And I'm not saying I do about Nico, but I think when I line all these things up right here, there's just this is a close one. This is probably one of the closer trades that we've went through. I
Totally.
think I think if it was me, I would probably take the Nico and Zay side on this one
Mm-hmm.
and just see if I can maybe get a good discount with that 203, because I just view Bo and Love so close in my personal dynasty rankings. Like how I personally would rank these guys is so close.
Yeah.
And say I would take over BTJ. It kind of seems like we're different on this one, so I'm interested to hear
Yeah.
what you think.
Yeah, no, and it's a good call out because we are different on this one, and I'll explain at least my reasoning why. But again, this is awesome. Why it's great to have different guys on the show and be able to hear everybody's opinions, because there's a ton that moves on in the dynasty landscape to unpack. But I think with you there, I'm just like Bo Nix versus Jordan Love. I haven't yet seen Jordan Love put together consecutive dynasty seasons in the top 10, and he's had his chances now. Now, I agree with you. They absolutely hammer Josh Jacobs in the red zone, and they love to run the ball. And so, could Jordan Love get uncorked and give you that level of upside? Talent-wise, yes. I just haven't seen it. And now that we got an extension with LaFleur in Green Bay, it's like, are we going to see it, or are we going to get
Sure.
more of the same, right? And I think until the status quo changes, I'm going to go with what I know. Now, what I do have is 2 back-to-back seasons of Bo Nix, the only sample size we've gotten him, QB7. Back-to-back, right?
Mhm.
So he has given you back-to-back top 10 finishes there. I know what I'm getting out of Bo Nix, and like you said, until Sean Payton decides to change his mind up, I'm expecting another top 10 season out of Bo Nix next year. That's all I've seen out of the man. So I'm going to take that. I think to the Tet point, yeah, I like Nico Collins. I've always really liked Nico Collins from a ceiling perspective. We just have never seen it. I mean, this year was his highest numerical finish as a wide receiver, I think 7 overall or wide receiver 8 overall. He did finish in the top 10. However, I just checked. He scored you in a PPR format 232 fantasy points, okay? Now, Teteroa McMillan with Bryce Young, who you mentioned, who is significantly, I think, not the level of quarterback that can tap into Tet's ceiling. And my guess is actually a little different than yours. I think if they were going to extend him, they would have already done it. It just makes more sense from a cap perspective. I think this 5th-year option is like, if you show me you can actually be incredible, we'll give you the deal. If not, 27 class has so many options. They'll probably to swing on a guy. There's a ton of quarterbacks coming in this class, and not to mention the free agency swing. That there's always some interesting guys in the quarterback roundup out there. Who are we to say that they don't want to go with Mac Jones next year after he gets released from San Francisco and give him a Sam Darnold chance to revive his career, right? So I think not to dive in too crazy there, but I think Teteroa would be a better quarterback with Mac Jones under, or would be a better wide receiver with Mac Jones under center. That's just my opinion. But regardless, he scored 213 fantasy points for you. So we're talking about a swing of about 20 points. Now, what we are talking about also is Nico turning 27, Tet being 22. We got a 5-year age difference there. I do think that Tet, and I am a notorious Tet lover, so take this all with a grain of salt, but I just think his athletic upside and his ability to high point a catch and potentially even be utilized more in the red zone moving forward is really interesting for me. So if I'm doing the math on this trade, kind of like we talked about, and it's even at this point, Nico in the 203 to acquire Tet, I think I'm just doing it because especially in this year's draft at the 203, I don't know if I'm getting somebody that's enough that's like, does it cover the 5-year age gap? Does it cover the fact that Tet probably has more upside in the long run than Nico, in the next 5 to 7 years of Dynasty? And yes, I know I probably sound a little bit like a contrarian out here telling you guys you got to play Dynasty in 2 to 3 year windows, and now I'm talking 5 to 7 years. But I just think understanding the Dynasty market too, I've watched, I play in so many leagues. We were talking before this, I play in over 20 Dynasty leagues. Like, I get a really good feeling of how players' value, changes on the open market because I play in so many leagues that I have my own market. I have my own economy inside my head. And as a guy who owns a lot of Nico Collins, what I could get for Nico Collins last offseason is night and day to what I can get for Nico Collins this offseason. And I'm wondering because you and I just acknowledged it. Nico just had a top 10 year. He just gave you a wide receiver 8 finish. It's not like he was, wide receiver 25 and suffered through a bunch of injuries. No, he just gave you what you're hoping out of him, a top 10 finish, and I'm not getting nearly as much. And so I think just understanding how the Dynasty market works, if Tet goes from wide receiver 16, which he was this year, to wide receiver 11 next year, which I think is very possible, you add one to 2 touchdowns in there that he didn't get this year, and he's there, I think I just have way more buying power. I think if I want to go from Tet to JSN, I can do it then. I think if I want to go from Nico to JSN at age 28, I don't think I'm getting it done. So I think my only thought process there is give me Bo Nix, give me Teteroa McMillan. I'm probably with you that Zay Flowers will probably outscore Brian Thomas Jr. this next year, especially after they extend Jacoby and Parker had a nice little bump in the midseason there. So I'll level with you on that one for the viewers out there, but I am going to lean the Tet side.
This one is so close. This, like I said, this
and
is
it's a close trade.
It's a very close trade to me. Like, I do not think that either side is going to come out and say, like, oh, I fleeced
you got fleeced. Yeah.
There's no fleecing, I don't think, going on this one. Because, like, I'll be, just to kind of cap off how I feel about Teteroa McMillan, I'm a big Coke boy. Like, I love me some Jalen Coker. And I think that what we saw in some of the critical stretches down the season for them was Jalen Coker did take over a lot. And it's not because I'm not saying that he's a better overall receiver than Teteroa McMillan. He's going to be their wide receiver 1. Not saying that. I think, though, what we saw was that, particularly against the Rams in that playoff game, they did a lot to minimize Teteroa McMillan's impact in that game. They had a very clear mandate from a defensive perspective, and they said, we want to minimize him. That opens up tons for Jalen Coker. And I think the whole point I'm saying that, and the reason I'm saying that is because when you look at Tedero and McMillan, I do think that this is kind of my concern with him as a prospect coming out of college. I don't think that he's like the best as far as the details on some of his routes, and I think he can be taken away sometimes. And
Sure.
so I think that opens up for Jalen Coker a little bit more. So I I like Tedero McMillan. He definitely proved me wrong. Like I said, didn't think he was going to be this good already. He's very good. I
Yeah.
just think
Yeah.
that Jalen Coker is a guy that, from a dynasty perspective, do not forget about this guy. Like, he is a guy that I think is a very good buy right now in dynasty, who could really become a very good contributor as far as being a flex worthy guy on your team.
There you go, guys. All right. Let us know in the comments where you landed on this one. It was a blockbuster to end it. Let us know too. Where do you land on Jalen Coker? Are you with Ryan here? Are we buying Jalen Coker across the dynasty landscape? I can't wait to see it all come back. Ryan, man, I had beyond a blast here. I'd love to talk for hours and hours and hours, but quite frankly, I want to break it up into a few shows. We got so many trades to go through. Hopefully, we can have you back really soon, and we'll blow through the rest of them. As a friendly reminder, guys, if you want your chance to submit your trades to be featured on the Trade Titans show, just click on that Discord link down below here. There's a channel in the Discord that says Trade Titan Submission. You can go ahead and just post your trades in there, whether they're proposals or real life trades that have gotten done, and you need help trying to figure out what you should do here. We're happy to help. As of all another friendly reminder, please do not forget, go check out Dynasty Roundup. Ryan's over there cranking content for you guys, nonstop, giving you all the toolkit you need this offseason to rework your Dynasty roster and get geared up for a championship run next year. Thanks for the continued support over here at Dynasty Price Check. If you haven't already, guys, go ahead and like and comment on the video. Drop a subscribe over here on this channel. We are going to have a weekly episode of Trade Titans now for the rest of the season. I had to take a little hiatus, but we're going to be coming at you hot and heavy with a ton of trades coming your way. Ryan, you got anything else to say to the people here?
No, I think it was a great time. I enjoyed every bit of it. And yeah, I think it sounds like a good idea to hop back on here and go through some more that we didn't get to.
Hell yeah.
And yeah, appreciate having me on here. And hope everyone out there is enjoying their off season without football, because I missed it already. But that's what golf is for me. So
Hell yeah, man. And I hope this shows too. I always like to mention it, but it seems like all these dynasty guys out here, love them all, love watching their content. We all operate behind a microphone and camera, and I love opening the conversation up for some friendly discourse and breaking down some trades. So hopefully we get more folks out there, starting the conversation, and let's keep it rolling all off season. And I didn't even get to it. I always love to throw a little film talk in here, but we're out of time. Next trade show, Ryan and I are going to talk about a little bit of movies too, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be freaking awesome. And thank you guys. Thanks for the continued support. We will see you in the next one. Subscribe over to Dynasty Roundup and Dynasty Price Check. Have a great one. Everybody take care.
adios.